We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates 7th edition of Indian Mobile Congress in New Delhi, says India will lead the world on 6G technology. EU leaders call for humanitarian corridors and pauses in Gaza amid escalating Israel-Hamas conflict. 900 US troops head to Middle East to bolster defenses as attacks surge. Israel says do not seek wider war. Gaza invasion will come when conditions are right. India continues with record performance at the Asian Para Games in China, dominates with 2 podium wins in badminton today. On to details now. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi today inaugurated the 7th edition of India Mobile Congress here in New Delhi. The Prime Minister also inaugurated 100 5G labs in select institutions across the country on the occasion. He also interacted with representatives of leading telecommunications companies of the country. Speaking on the occasion, Prime Minister Modi said, "We have more than 100,000 startups at present in comparison to 2014. He added, "We'll keep this pace in the future as well."
2014 में हमारे पास, मैं 2014 क्यों कह रहा हूं पता है ना? वो तारीख नहीं है, एक बदलाव है। 2014 के पहले भारत के पास कुछ 100 स्टार्टअप थे, कुछ 100s, लेकिन अब ये संख्या 1 लाख के आसपास पहुंच गई है। इस पड़ाव पर हमें ये भी याद रखना होगा कि हम कितना दूर आए हैं और इतना दूर किन परिस्थितियों के बाद आए हैं।
Prime Minister Modi highlighted the significance of telecom in India's digital transformation. He added that our democracy is helping in digitally empowering the people of the country and also uplifting their financial status.
कनेक्टिविटी की स्पीड और अवेलेबिलिटी सोशल और इकोनॉमिक दोनों ही रूप से बड़ा परिवर्तन करते हैं। हम हर क्षेत्र में पावर ऑफ डेमोक्रेटाइजेशन पर विश्वास करते हैं। भारत में विकास का लाभ हर वर्ग, हर क्षेत्र तक पहुंचे। भारत में संसाधनों का सभी को लाभ मिले, सभी को सम्मानजनक जीवन मिले और सभी तक टेक्नोलॉजी का फायदा पहुंचे। इस दिशा में हम तेजी से काम कर रहे हैं और मेरे लिए यही सबसे बड़ा सामाजिक न्याय है।
Well, PM Modi also said India's technology landscape witnessed historic journey in the past 9 years.
आप 10-12 साल पहले के मोबाइल फोन्स को याद करिए। तब आउटडेटेड फोन की स्क्रीन घड़ी-घड़ी हैंग हो जाती थी। ऐसा ही होता था ना? जरा बताइए ना। चाहे आप स्क्रीन को कितना भी स्वाइप कर लें, चाहे जितने भी बटन दबा लें, असर कुछ होता ही नहीं था। बराबर है ना? और ऐसी ही स्थिति उस समय सरकार की भी थी। उस समय भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था का या कहें या तब की सरकार ही हैंग हो गए वाले मोड में थी। और हालत तो इतना बिगड़ चुका था, रीस्टार्ट करने से कोई फायदा नहीं था। बैटरी चार्ज करने से भी फायदा नहीं था, बैटरी बदलने से भी फायदा नहीं था। 2014 में लोगों ने ऐसे आउटडेटेड फोन को छोड़ दिया और अब हमें सेवा करने का अवसर दिया।
Well, shifting focus now on Israel-Hamas conflict, EU leaders on Thursday called for pauses in Israeli bombing and Hamas rocket attacks to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. After more than 5 hours of discussions, EU leaders have reached an agreement on the Middle East. In the declaration, the leaders of the Union's 27 nations expressed the gravest concern for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. They called for continued, rapid, safe and unhindered humanitarian access and aid to reach those in need through all necessary measures, including humanitarian corridors and pauses for humanitarian needs. The declaration also said the European Council reiterates its condemnation in the strongest possible terms of Hamas for its brutal and indiscriminate terrorist attacks across Israel. It also added the use of civilians as human shields by Hamas is particularly deplorable atrocity. The summit was the leaders' first in-person meeting since the deadly October 7th assault.
We talked a lot about the absolute necessity of acting on a humanitarian level. We can see the serious deterioration of the humanitarian situation and the importance of developing measures to guarantee access to equipment and humanitarian aid. Food, water, electricity, medicines. We need to be very active, including with humanitarian corridors, humanitarian pauses, to allow the humanitarian aid to be delivered. During the meeting, we decided to affirm the European Union's support for an international peace conference which should take place soon.
There was a strong call from the leaders that Hamas must immediately release all hostages without any preconditions. And it was clear that through its terrorist activities, Hamas is also bringing harm to the Palestinian people. Hamas has provoked a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. For the Commission, it's very important that we continue to intensify our efforts to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The aid needs to reach Gaza unhindered and quickly.
Meanwhile, European Union leaders will discuss the bloc's budget, competitiveness and the Eurozone on the second day of the European Council meeting. It comes after they agreed to call for humanitarian pauses and corridors in Gaza to allow for aid to reach civilians. Julia Chapman reports from Brussels.
Day 2 of the European Council summit will focus more on the European Union's competitiveness and the health of the economy of the countries that use the euro as their currency, with Eurozone members having their own chats alongside the President of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, after rates were held in the Eurozone on Thursday. And Lagarde said that although the economy will remain fairly flat this year, the growth prognosis over the next few years is a positive one. But on Thursday, the main focus when the European Union leaders got together for talks here in Brussels was very much the Middle East, and there was a lot of wrangling over the language that would be used in the joint declaration signed by leaders at the end of the first day of their talks. Some countries wanted to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Others wanted to stress rather Israel's right to defend itself. But ultimately what the wording came to was an agreement that there should be calls for humanitarian corridors and pauses to allow aid to reach civilians inside Gaza, something that all European leaders agree is necessary. They have urged both sides to protect civilians, saying that that is the most important thing in this conflict, but certainly a difference of opinion when it comes to how that should be carried out. There were also discussions about Ukraine, with some dissent over how much future aid money should be allocated to Kyiv as it fights Russia in its war, but also discussions about the budget that will be involved in, with some 50 billion euros allocated provisionally for Ukraine over the next 4 years. Some countries like Hungary and the new administration in Slovakia saying that is not something that they are going to agree on. And of course, budgets require unanimity among all 27 European Union member states. Julia Chapman in Brussels, reporting for DD India.
Well, after 2 failed resolutions, members of the United Nations Security Council are debating a third one, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The draft put forward by Jordan has been criticized by Israel for failing to mention Hamas. Palestinian UN envoy Riyad Mansour accused certain nations of applying a clear double standard. Sally Patterson has more.
More than 110 representatives were scheduled to address the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday. They all wanted to have their say on the proposal calling for a humanitarian ceasefire and for all parties to uphold their obligations under international humanitarian law. The draft, authored by Jordan, calls for immediate and continuous provision of essentials to civilians, including water, food and medical supplies. It also demands that UN workers and other humanitarian organisations, such as the Red Cross, are able to safely work on the ground in Gaza. At least 35 UN workers have been killed so far in the past couple of weeks. Now, in an emotive speech, Ambassador of the Permanent Observer Mission of the State of Palestine, Riyad Mansour, told representatives that people in Gaza were being killed as the debate unfolded. He said 3,000 children have died so far, and families have fled their homes with nowhere to go. Mansour implored members to vote for the resolution and, quote, stop the killing. But during his speech, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, took issue with the content of the draft. He criticised it for not mentioning Hamas's attacks on Israel on October 7th. 1,400 Israelis and foreign nationals have died, and more than 200 were taken hostage. Erdan called the proposal distorted and disconnected from reality. The debate is scheduled to resume on Friday. Sally Patterson in New York, reporting for DD India.
Meanwhile, the UN's humanitarian chief has warned that aid is barely trickling into Gaza as the world is failing to meet the bare entitlements of a part of humanity. UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs Martin Griffiths said that heavy bombardments on Gaza continue and are getting worse, even in areas supposed to be safer. In a post on X, Griffiths said the rules of war are clear, that civilians must be protected and have the essentials to survive. Pentagon has said about 900 additional U.S. troops are heading to the Middle East or have newly arrived there to bolster air defenses to protect U.S. personnel amid a surge in attacks in the region by militia groups. As tensions soar over the Israel Hamas war, U.S. troops have been attacked at least 12 times in Iraq and 4 times in Syria in the past week.
Approximately 900 troops have subsequently deployed or are in the process of deploying to the U.S. Central Command area of responsibility. These include forces that have been on prepare to deploy orders and which are deploying from the continental United States. Deployed and deploying units include a terminal high-altitude area defense battery from Fort Bliss, Texas, Patriot batteries from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Patriot and Avenger batteries from Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and associated air defense headquarters elements from Fort Bliss and Fort Cavados, Texas. I can confirm that they are not going to Israel and that, again, they are intended to support regional deterrence efforts and further bolster U.S. force protection capabilities.
Well, Pentagon has meanwhile confirmed that the U.S. military has launched airstrikes early on Friday on 2 locations in eastern Syria linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups. The Pentagon said these precision self-defense strikes are a response to a series of ongoing and mostly unsuccessful attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria by militia groups that began on October 17th. And still to come on this edition of DD India Live. From one war front to another, we give you updates on Russia-Ukraine conflict. Massive manhunt underway for Maine shooter, 8 injured people still in treatment. And South Africa take on Pakistan in the ICC World Cup today.
That never stops. Ahead of time. Introducing the DD India app, your gateway to a world of news right at your fingertips. Your most trusted source of news goes global, goes digital. Explore a world of options, top stories, live updates, in-depth analysis, and more. Stay informed wherever you are. Real-time alerts keep you ahead of the curve always. The DD India app, connecting you to the world one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights, and authentic information.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and moving on, top diplomats from the United States and China, Antony Blinken and Wang Yi, held a crucial meeting in Washington to discuss preventing the Israel-Gaza conflict from spreading beyond its borders. Both countries have expressed a readiness to collaborate. Caroline Maloney provides the details from Washington.
Ahead of his meeting with the US Secretary of State Blinken, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the two nations need to have dialogue to reduce misunderstanding and seek more stable relations, but that he's hopeful that the talks will be constructive. Wang is also due to meet National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Friday. There's also a chance for direct talks with President Biden. The US and China have been ramping up diplomacy in recent months after years of testy relations. There was the fallout over trade tariffs, then a Chinese spy balloon over the US that was shot down, leading to a souring in relations. But in recent months, US officials have visited Beijing, and now Chinese officials are in the US. If it all goes well, it could lead to a visit from Chinese President Xi Jinping, who may attend the APEC Leaders Summit in San Francisco next month. And there could be a possible Biden-Xi meeting on the sidelines. Caroline Malone, Washington for DD India.
Well, news now on Russia-Ukraine conflict. The United States on Thursday said that the Russian military is executing soldiers who do not follow orders related to the war with Ukraine. According to the US, some of the casualties suffered by Russia near Avdiivka were on the orders of their own leaders. Russian and Ukrainian troops have been locked into a fierce battle for the frontline town since mid-October.
We have information that the Russian military has been actually executing soldiers who refuse to follow orders. We also have information that Russian commanders are threatening to execute entire units if they seek to retreat from Ukrainian artillery fire. And as long as Russia continues its brutal assault, we have to continue to support the Ukrainian people in their self-defense.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has announced a new $150 million military assistance package for Ukraine. That includes artillery and small arms ammunition, as well as anti-tank weapons. However, future aid to Ukraine is in doubt following the election of Republican Mike Johnson as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives earlier this week. Johnson, who is on the right wing of the Republican Party, is against further U.S. aid to Ukraine and has previously supported amendments to block it. The U.S. is the largest military donor to Ukraine, having spent more than $46 billion so far, plus tens of billions more in financial and humanitarian aid. And Ukraine has denied reports of suspension of the new Black Sea export corridor on Thursday. A British firm claimed earlier that Ukraine had suspended use of the corridor due to a possible threat from Russian warplanes and sea mines. Ukraine has been using the corridor to try to revive its exports without Russian approval, defying threats from Moscow that quit a UN brokered deal in July that had allowed some food exports to flow despite the war. And a manhunt is continuing in the U.S. state of Maine after a gunman killed 18 people and injured another 13. Authorities have released pictures of a man carrying the assault rifle entering two establishments where he opened fire. U.S. correspondent Nick Harper sends this report.
An unsettling, unnerving day during which much of southern Maine was under lockdown. People barricaded in their homes in fear of what might happen next. Schools and businesses, many of them closed for the day, while police searched for the suspect. That suspect, 40-year-old Robert Card, seen in a bowling alley and restaurant with an assault rifle. Police releasing those pictures soon after the shootings took place on Wednesday night. Maine's Governor, Janet Mills, spoke about the profound sadness that the community was dealing with. She said that the city of Lewiston, where these shootings unfolded, did not deserve that terrible assault. Now, Maine is a state of about 1.3 million people. It's considered one of the safer states in the United States. But attention is now turning to issues of mental health and gun control. Robert Card was reportedly a gun instructor, but also had known mental health issues, raising questions about how he was able to own a firearm, which is leading the White House to call for a ban on assault weapons. There was a 10-year ban that was in place until it lapsed in 2004 and hasn't been reinstated since then. President Biden, during his time in office, has been calling for a ban on assault weapons. We heard that again from the White House podium. The press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, saying that the president wanted that ban to be in place. But to do so, it must pass through Congress, and many Republicans there argue that the right to bear arms is a constitutional right and not something that should be dictated to them by the White House. So far, there have been at least 565 mass shooting incidents in the US this year. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
And Hurricane Otis left the trail of destruction in Mexico's Acapulco. Satellite images from Thursday showed the devastating images of the city, including flooded streets, ripped roofs of homes and hotels. The storm has disrupted communication, road and air traffic. The airports were forced to shut due to extensive hurricane damage. Otis has claimed at least 27 lives, while 4 others are reported missing. The government has declared a state of emergency in the region. In a distressing turn of events following the passage of Hurricane Otis, people were seen looting supermarkets in Acapulco. As Acapulco faces this challenging situation, efforts are underway to provide relief and aid to those affected by Hurricane Otis. And moving on, JP Morgan has upgraded India to an overweight rating, thus joining the group of leading global brokerage firms like Morgan Stanley, CLCA and Nomura, who have also praised the country's growing appeal to investors. In a key move, the brokerage has included 3 prominent stocks: Sun Pharmaceutical Industries Limited, Bank of Baroda and Hindustan Unilever in its emerging markets model portfolio. Several factors underpin this decision, including the positive seasonality linked to general elections, the robust growth in emerging markets, nominal GDP, and the expansion of the domestic bond market, expected to reduce risk premiums. Now to sports now. With 2 more days left in the Asian Para Games, India is on course to achieving its target of 100 medals in this Hangzhou edition. India has jumped to 4th position, 94 medals in total, including 24 gold medals, 27 silver and 43 bronze medals. Early on Thursday, India overtook its best ever gold medal tally in the Asian Para Games, going past its numbers from 2018. And on to ICC World Cup 2023, Babar Azam's Pakistan will be under tremendous pressure when they take on South Africa today. Pakistan have played in 5 matches so far, losing in 3. These 3 defeats came in back-to-back matches, which has derailed their World Cup campaign. Pakistan aims to topple South Africa, who are playing some amazing cricket of late. Like Pakistan, South Africa too have played in 5 games, winning in 4 matches and sit at 2nd spot in the points table, just below India. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India Live. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.